Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Then I said, Ah, Lord God, truly I do not know how to speak, for I am only a boy. But the Lord said to me, Do not say, I am only a boy, for you shall go to all to whom I send you, and you shall speak whatever I command you. Do not be afraid of them, for I am with you to deliver you, says the Lord. Then the Lord put out his hand and touched my mouth, and the Lord said to me, Now I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and over kingdoms, to pluck up and to pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant.
Far too many of us believe that the call and the role of the church is to be the nice people that keep the peace. That our job is to find the middle ground and to try to bring everybody together. I'm reminded that Bishop Yvette Flunder, in her book Where the Edge Gathers, says that God is never in the middle, but always at the edges. And so that when we try to get to the middle, we're actually moving away from God and not moving towards God. But allow me to suggest to you that being the nice faith people is neither biblical nor faithful. As a matter of fact, if you say that you are a follower of Jesus Christ and you spend all your time trying to be nice, I want to know what gospel you read. If you spend all your time trying to make peace and not trying to upset folk and not trying to agitate folk and not trying to challenge the systems and challenge the empire, I want to know what gospel you read, because it's not the same one that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where this guy named Jesus, this rabbi from Nazareth, is running around upsetting everybody. If you spend all your time trying to make those in the empire, in government, feel good, if you spend all your time trying to make sure the religious elites feel good, then you are not doing the ministry of Jesus. After all, he called the Sanhedrin and the Sadducees and the Pharisees sly foxes. And I know in the 1970s, to say somebody was a fox was a cool thing. It didn't mean the same thing in Jesus' day. To say that they were whitewashed tombs. And if you've ever been into Jerusalem, you see all the tombs are whitewashed. They look pretty on the outside, but everything on the inside is dead and gone. Flesh and sinew, bone and muscle, it's all gone. Everything is gone. He called them whitewashed tombs. He called them sly foxes. He called them brood of vipers. So we have to ask ourselves over and over again, when we are doing our ministry, when we are preaching our sermons, when we are teaching our Sunday school lessons, when we are singing our songs, when we are living our lives, are we acting in a way that is supporting an empire that is trying to rip families apart, trying to keep black folk in prison, trying to keep people from getting the health care that they need? Are we busy being chaplains of an empire, trying to create peace with the evil? Are we going to be prophets of the resistance that will stand up and speak truth come hell or high water, and whatever anybody throws about us, we are going to speak truth about the fact that we are all God's children, and that God loves each and every one of us, and that God wants each and every one of us to thrive. Far too many of us look for our faith to be a safe space. But we cannot believe that our faith is going to be a safe space in this age that we are in right now. The world is waiting, not just America, not just your community. The world is waiting for this church to stand up and point the way towards wholeness and healing. But sometimes to get there, we have to first open a badly healed wound. We've got to clean out all the infection. We've got to remove the dead flesh. Then we have to apply a salve and then bandage the wound. Sometimes to fix broken things, it requires a little bit of pain. How many of you have had a toothache? Had a cavity had to get filled? Broken a bone. It was bad enough when you broke it, but when they had to set it, oh Lord. We have some work that we have to do. In today's text, this is the call text of Jeremiah, and he begins his ministry from the time of King Josiah, a reform-minded king who was attempting to restore faith values into the nation and pulling it away from serving other idols. However, other kings, the sons of Josiah, would come who did not own a commitment to justice and righteousness. As a result, the nation began a quick slide in credibility and respect, so much so that it was eventually overtaken by another nation who had supplanted a godly government. You had a good king replaced by a bad king, and then other governments began to run that kingdom. A good king and a bad king, and other governments began to run that kingdom. I'm just saying that there was a good king, and then there was a bad king, and then other governments began to run that kingdom. Let me just say that one more time. There was a good king and a bad king, and then other governments began to run that kingdom. I don't know if anybody's had that experience before, but it was in that social political moment that Jeremiah was called. It is in this social political moment that we are called. Now, I know that there are billions of Christians around the world, but we all do not act and do the same thing. We all do not see the faith the same way. And God bless them. And for those that don't see it the way that I see it, I love them. But sometimes we don't agree. And there are times and places when there are those people that have been called and set apart to even provide correction to the church. Those that have been called to reform it and to cause it to think. The fact of the matter is the United Church wouldn't have existed except for Martin Luther. And that there were others that have come along that have reformed the church over a period of time. And I believe that not only are we called to reform society, but there's got to be a reformation happening in the church at the same time. That we've got some work that we have to do internally if we're going to be faithful and be able to be used of God in this moment. But the reality is that much like this text, the church acts the same way. We get called of God to go do something very powerful and very mighty. It's wonderful. In verses 4 to 5, we see that God comes to Jeremiah and says, look, before your mama and daddy ever looked at each other, I knew you, and I had a plan for your life. I knew everything that was going to happen to you and what you were supposed to do. I set you apart even before you came into this world. And that's real good. And Jeremiah says, not me. And how many times do we in our own congregations, when we hear the call of God, how many times do we not only as individuals, but as corporate communities say, that's not my work. It's not my work to agitate to be able to fight for racial justice and economic justice. It's not my fight to fight for LGBTQ justice. It's not my fight to fight for healthcare justice. It's not my fight to be able to get equity and funding for school districts across the state. It's not my fight to be able to fight so that all of our children are able to live their full. It's not my fight. I'm just concerned about me and mine, except that's not the gospel. That's never what God has called us to. And so we begin to put up resistance and start making excuses about why we can't be what it is that God is trying to call us to in that moment of time. God, I don't know enough. God, I'm not sure of myself. And so Moses saying, I don't speak well enough, God. But don't you know that every time that you are telling God no, what you're saying to God is that God is not big enough to give you everything you need to be able to thrive? Finally, God has to say to Jeremiah, look, I got this. I'm with you. I don't even want you to worry about what to say. I'm going to give you the words on the spot, in the moment, to be able to speak the truth. And then God, she reaches out her hand and lays it on her son. And anoints him for the work that's in front of him. And then she tells Jeremiah, got some things that I need you to do. The first thing the divine says is that I'm appointing you over nations and kingdoms. And I know for us, in our theological positions, this notion about faith giving direction to nations and kingdoms seems very odd and strange, that we see ourselves as a large part of the larger context. But part of the problem that we have, and perhaps this has been the misnomer of our traditions and where some of our evangelical brothers and sisters see things a little bit differently, is that we've been satisfied during the invocations and the benedictions and told that everything in between is none of our business. That when the mayor or the governor calls us up, come and give us an invocation or come and give us a benediction, but when we start talking about the real issues, they're like people of faith have nothing to say in this moment in time. But it's my firm belief that it is us who have been called in this hour to lead the way. It's not going to be Democrats or Republicans. It's going to be people of faith that are going to step up and lead the way towards creating a society where everybody is able to thrive. But to be able to do that, we've got to own the fact that God has called us to step into the public square and to be bold enough to speak truth regardless of who's sitting in the seat. I don't care if you're green, I don't care if you're Dem, I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care if you're a libertarian. I am here to speak the truth of God, and it transcends all politics. Amen. So part of our work is understanding and accepting the fact that God has called us in this hour not to be side players and not to allow anybody to sideline us because of our faith. We should be directing culture and society, not being subject to culture and society. And for far too many of us, our politics dictate our faith instead of our faith dictating our politics. Somewhere along the line, we messed that up. And so the first thing is you're set apart over nations and kingdoms. But the second part is that you have to pluck up and pull down. This is an agricultural text, right? So this is an agricultural society they lived in. And so this is the notion about cleaning a field and preparing a field so that the harvest can come. So that the harvest is able to take root. And then sometimes when we look at society, there's some things that we've got to pluck up and to pull down. There's some rocks that we got to get rid of in the field because the soil, the seed won't take root because there are rocks in the soil. There's some weeds that are there that are choking out life. And then there's some ivy growing up on the sides of the building that's blocking out the sun from being able to come in. Sometimes we've got to go do some work to be able to go back and pull up the rocks, get them up, plug them up, get them out, get the weeds out of the way that are choking the life out of us, and move the ivy that's growing up over everything and trying to block the sun from being able to come in. If we were to really go back through our journey and begin to ask our questions, what are these things that we've got to plug up and to pull down? Many of you could begin to talk about them. You could talk about racism and sexism, homophobia and transphobia. We could begin to have a conversation about all manner of things that are preventing us from really being able to experience being the children of God. And that they're destroying us. That even to some extent we've got to go back and question some of our theological understandings and asking us the question, are they leading us to liberation or are they helping us get to a place of exclusivity? Far too often the church talks a good game. We say all the right things, but do we do the right things? So there's some things we've got to pluck up and pull down. We've got to get rid of in our journey, get them out of the way, push it to the side, create a pile over there of all the weeds and figure out what to do with them later on. But we don't like doing that work. We like living in our homogeneous communities where everybody looks the same and supposedly has the same values. We like being in homogeneous spaces where everybody acts the same and knows all the values and the mores. And we act like we're doing something. And the reality is that when we do that, all we're doing is presupposing and maintaining a societal construct that allows people to continually be oppressed and excluded from being able to benefit from all the blessings of the divine. Sometimes we've got to look inside of ourselves. I told y'all you were going to get a little agitated. I did not lie to you. I wanted to be honest with you. But then there were some things that had to be destroyed and overthrown. And Christian folk in this generation really we don't want to be violent. I'm not inciting violence. I am inciting revolutionary behavior. But I'm not inciting violence. But there's some aspects of our world that must be overthrown. And there's some elements of our society that must absolutely be destroyed. Our society is rooted and thrives. Dr. Stephen Ray, who's the president of Chicago Theological Seminary, a fraternity brother of mine, who went to Western New England College over in Springfield, who started out there, eventually finished at Charter Oak College and went to Yale Divinity School. He's got deep New England roots. I bring that up because I'm in New England. But Dr. Ray and I are close, and some years ago, I brought Dr. Stephen Ray to Philadelphia when I was living there at the time for a meeting around a moral economy. And he said something that was very interesting. He was both an economist and a theologian, a systematic theologian. And he said something about the American economy. He said, American economy thrives off the misery of dark-skinned bodies. And he didn't say it thrived off dark-skinned bodies. He said it thrived off the misery of dark-skinned bodies. And I found it intriguing until the day after the 2016 election, when two companies, one named GEO and the other one the Correctional Corporations of America, their stock went up 300 and 1,000%, all because they knew what was coming down the road, which was the misery of dark-skinned bodies. That there was going to be an increase in incarceration in this country. There was going to be an increase in people being detained and being deported in this country. And it was all based on the misery of dark-skinned bodies. We've got to overthrow racism and overthrow white supremacy. And yes, I said it, we've got to overthrow white supremacy. Can we get to a place that we understand that the beauty understand the beauty of the cornucopia of colors and ethnicities that God has created is for our growth and benefit. That it is not a curse, but a blessing. And that if we would learn from one another instead of seeing each other as the enemy, perhaps it would be a different world. We've got to destroy and overthrow elements of xenophobia and ableism, transphobia, homophobia. And I'm going to be bold enough to say that we have to overthrow unfettered capitalism that commodifies the human body based on economic value instead of the intrinsic value of every human being. Just a few claps on that one. I noticed that. Y'all like your money. But the reality is that we've got to overthrow and destroy this notion in this country that the dollar is God. It is not. It has never been and should never be. We've created an idol out of money. We've created an idol out of possessions. We've created an idol out of things. And it is killing us. In much the same way that the kings that came after King Josiah began to create idols and allow people to live and follow and worship idols. The idol of money is killing us in this nation, and as a result, it is killing the world. How do we know? Because if the United States would actually address climate change, 70% of the world would be far safer than it is right now. Yet we don't make up 70% of the world by any means, but what we do here is destroying what's happening in other places around the world. We've got to destroy this notion about the fact that we have the right to poison, kill, and destroy everybody else. It is not of God. God desires all of God's children. All of her children, black and white, brown, those that are Asian Pacific Islander and indigenous communities around the world, desires all of her children thrive. But then there's this piece that comes at the very end of this text. that God, in her infinite wisdom, is telling Jeremiah. And she says, I want you to go build and plant. You can't plant a harvest in an untilled field. And right now, in our world, in our country, weeds are growing everywhere. Rocks are stumbling blocks for people all over the place. But to be able to win, we have to begin to plant seeds that tell a different sacred story. We have to tell the story and plant it in the souls of our families and our communities in the world. A story that tells us about the value of all creation in life. The value of all life, not just some life, but all life. A story that talks about the value of redemption and restoration, not just punishment. A story that places at its center the notion of a cornucopia of all of God's creation. A notion that diversity is a blessing and not a curse. A notion of a sacred narrative that tells a story that is meant to help all of us grow and thrive and to learn and celebrate. A notion that says that all of God's children, whether you're from the south or from the north, whether you're from the east or from the west, whether you're from uptown or downtown, whether you're from the suburbs, the exurbs, or from the rural areas, whether you speak one language or two languages or three languages, or you can't even speak one language well, it doesn't make a difference. That you are valued, you are welcome, you are loved, you are wanted in this world and in this place. But we will not get there if we continue to do church as usual. We will not get there with the same old litanies and liturgies. We will not get there with the same old sermons with their 3 points at the end of the day that send people back out no different than the way that they came in. The way that we create the change is that we have the audacity to believe that God has given us the power to be different in the world, the power to speak truth in the world, the power to get people to yell at us and cuss at us and tell us that we are not the children of God. That's when you know you're doing something, when people don't like you and don't want to be bothered with you. They're hating when you show up at the board meeting. They're hating when you show up at city council meeting. They're hating when you show up in the street. That's when you know you're doing the will of God. God is not looking for a church that's going to sit on Sunday and be happy, but looking for a church that's going to get up on Monday morning and begin to get out into the streets, begin to lock arms with everybody. God bless your family. Amen. Amen.
Glory and praise to the Lamb that was slain, who has borne all our sins and has cleansed every stain. Hallelujah, and glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, and the glory. Revive us again. Revive us again. Fill each heart with thy love. May each soul be rekindled with fire from above. Hallelujah, thine the glory. Hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine the glory.